20 million barrels of oil flow through a corridor just 21 miles wide every day. On March 11, 2026, IRGC Rear Admiral Tangsiri declared every vessel now required Tehran's permission to pass. One decree turned the Strait of Hormuz from the world's most vital shipping lane into the most consequential economic weapon since the 1973 Arab oil embargo. What followed was a chain reaction no emergency reserve could contain. At its narrowest, the Strait of Hormuz squeezes global ambition into a corridor just 21 nautical miles wide. The water plunges 60 meters deep, enough for the world's largest oil tankers, their hulls loaded to the legal limit, to slip through a channel bordered by Iranian radar and missile batteries on one side and the US Fifth Fleet on the other. Every day in peacetime, this bottleneck moves nearly 20 million barrels of petroleum, crude, condensate, and refined products toward markets that span from Shanghai to Rotterdam. That's 1 out of every 5 barrels burned worldwide, a volume that dwarfs the output of most oil-producing nations. The Strait's dimensions are not just numbers on a map. They are the hard limits that define how much oil the world can move and how quickly a single decree can choke off supply. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Kuwait, and Qatar all depend on this route. There is no alternative pipeline or port that can absorb the loss if Hormuz closes. International treaties, from UNCLOS to bilateral export agreements, enshrine the right of free passage, but geography cares nothing for legal arguments. When Admiral Tangsiri announced that Iran alone would decide who passes, the world's energy arteries constricted to a single fragile lifeline. The numbers, 21 nautical miles, 60 meters deep, 20 million barrels each day, became the metrics by which risk, price, and national security would be measured. In a matter of hours, the value of that bottleneck would be tested not by theory, but by force. On March 11th, the rules of the world's oil trade changed with a single order. Rear Admiral Alireza Tangsiri, commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy, declared that every vessel seeking to cross the Strait of Hormuz must first secure explicit Iranian permission. His words, broadcast across state media and social networks, left little room for doubt. The decision to keep the strait open rests with Iran's leadership. Vessels linked to aggressors will be denied passage and may be targeted. Within hours, policy turned violent. At 2:15 a.m., the Express Room, a commercial cargo ship, lost contact as it approached the strait's pinch point. Minutes later, the Mary Nari, flagged to Thailand, was hit by a precision-guided anti-ship missile. Satellite thermal imagery captured a brief flare of fire on the water. The crew abandoned ship. The Thai Ministry of Transport later confirmed a hull breach and loss of cargo, but no fatalities. By dawn, the message was clear. Iran would enforce its decree with force, and no flag was immune. The next target was the Safesea Vishnu, an Iraqi flag-buoyed tanker. Its AIS signal vanished at 3 a.m., coinciding with reports of a missile launch from the Iranian coast. Though the vessel survived, investigators found evidence of shrapnel and a near miss that forced the crew to seek tug assistance. In the midst of these attacks, Iranian drones, Karar-type loitering munitions, circled above the shipping lanes, nearly striking a third vessel before veering off. The threat was not just theoretical, it was airborne and immediate. By sunrise, the message had traveled farther than any missile. Iran's control over Hormuz was no longer a diplomatic bargaining chip, it was a live weapon, and the world's oil supply now depended on the decisions of a single admiral and the willingness of foreign captains to risk everything on a passage through crosshairs. At 0400 hours on February 16th, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a drill that would move the Strait of Hormuz from visible threat to invisible peril. Satellite images captured mine-laying vessels slipping out of Bandar Abbas, their decks loaded with cylindrical shapes, naval mines designed to vanish beneath the surface. The IRGC called it smart control, a doctrine that fused radar, electronic jamming, and remote detonation into a single, unpredictable hazard. Within 1 hour, the first 10 mines were seeded along the main shipping channel. By sunrise, the suspected field stretched to 30, though open-source analysts could only confirm a dozen through abrupt route changes and lost AIS signals from commercial tankers. Unlike missile strikes, mines do not announce themselves. They turn the world's busiest oil corridor into a guessing game. Tanker captains, faced with the possibility of a single pressure trigger detonating under 1 million barrels of crude, halted their vessels mid-transit. Satellite thermal imagery recorded a sudden drop in movement. More than 400 ships idled in the Gulf, their cargoes trapped behind an invisible wall. Insurance underwriters responded by suspending coverage for any vessel lacking explicit Iranian clearance, a move that froze traffic more effectively than any blockade order. The IRGC's smart control concept weaponized uncertainty. It was not the number of mines, whether 10, 16, or 30, but the knowledge that any passage could be fatal that forced the strait's closure. The world's oil supply, once measured in steady flows and daily barrel counts, now depended on the unseen mathematics of risk. By the end of the day, the Strait of Hormuz had become a silent minefield, its threat hidden below the waterline, halting the arteries of global trade without firing another shot. At 0500 hours on March 13th, the U.S. Fifth Fleet launched its answer to Iran's gambit in the Strait of Hormuz. The operation began with a coordinated missile strike. USS Portland and USS Carney fired a barrage of SM-2 and Harpoon missiles, targeting a flotilla of Iranian mine-laying vessels assembled near Bandar Abbas. Within minutes, satellite feeds captured the aftermath. 16 hulls burning, smoke curling over the narrow channel that just days before had been transformed into a minefield. CENTCOM's communique confirmed the outcome. 16 Iranian mine layers destroyed, the largest single-day maritime strike in the Gulf since the 1980s. The action extended below the surface. SEAL Team 8, operating from USS Higgins, boarded a mine layer caught laying mines in the southern approaches. The team secured the deck, recovered 4 live pressure-sensitive warheads, and set demolition charges. The explosion marked the end of one more threat, with no U.S. casualties reported. The Pentagon's press briefing cited this boarding as a textbook example of kinetic denial, removing hazards before they could close the world's energy artery. By the end of March 13th, President Trump announced that a total of 28 Iranian mine-laying ships had been destroyed since the start of hostilities. Treasury Secretary Marilyn Besant promised that U.S. Navy escorts for commercial tankers would resume as soon as militarily feasible. A Fifth Fleet press release on March 15th echoed the commitment to restore safe passage, but the economic damage was already spreading. The blockade had been broken by force, yet the world's oil markets had already absorbed the shock. The physical threat receded, but the price of risk continued to climb. Brent crude surged past $120 a barrel in a single trading day, a jolt not seen since the last major Gulf crisis. Oil benchmarks across the world spiked 7 to 10% within hours, as traders scrambled to price in the sudden loss of nearly 20 million barrels per day from global supply. The shockwave hit every corner of the economy. Shipping rates surged, gasoline futures leapt by double digits, and equity markets shed trillions in value in the space of a week. The International Energy Agency moved to contain the panic, authorizing an emergency release of 60 million barrels from strategic reserves. Tankers were rerouted, storage depots tapped, but the drawdown could only soften the blow. The numbers told the story. A single choke point, when weaponized, could send the world's financial system into freefall, and no amount of reserve oil could fully replace what the Strait of Hormuz once delivered each day. Governments scrambled to shield their economies as the oil shock rippled outward. The European Union rushed to secure emergency LNG contracts, deploying 5 billion euros to charter additional cargoes and activate floating storage units in Spain and the Baltic. In Bangladesh, the Ministry of Power ordered a 15% cut in diesel allocations and suspended non-essential fuel subsidies, forcing early university closures and rationed electricity. Pakistan's finance ministry imposed a 10% excise tax on gasoline and diesel, aiming to fund costly imports and curb demand. These measures landed hard on ordinary households, where fuel shortages and price spikes became daily realities. In Tehran, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei addressed the nation. The Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until the United States and Israel cease all hostile actions against the Iranian people. We will bear the cost, but the world will feel a far greater pain. For Iran's leadership, economic pain was not collateral, it was the strategy. 20 million barrels a day, nearly a fifth of global oil, hinge on a corridor just 21 miles wide. Admiral Tangsiri's decree and missile strikes on the Sea Voyager and Harmony Star proved a single order can rattle economies from Karachi to Rotterdam. The world's supply chain remains one blockade away from chaos.